Welcome, all you excited people to learn about security and privacy in the cloud. Let's do some housekeeping first. Please silence your phones. We're totally okay if you need to take a call. Please go outside to take the call.
That's also communication security. Yeah. Mine isn't working. Okay, you hear me now? Yep. So yes, if you take a call within here, everyone can hear you. So that's communication security.
PaaS has a lot to offer. You probably have seen these slides at least one time before during this week. They have, in addition to all the virtual groups they have available online, there are also local user groups who has their meetings regularly, and also please find if there is a SQL Saturday, one day free event around where you live, or you can travel to Portability. But all the information on what kind of education you can get through PaaS is, there are links at the PaaS website. Please also, if you would like to win prizes, then that's a good reason to submit your evaluations for the sessions. For if we're going to be a little bit introspect, if you submit evaluations on this session, that also means that we can learn to get better. So please do that.
So my name is Johan Ludvig. I work for Capgemini as the lead solution architect. I'm co-organizing SQL Saturday Oslo. I'm board member of the user group in Norway. And in my spare time, I also teach celiacs how to bake gluten-free food.
Yeah, my name is Rune Oblin Rakeie. I work as a data platform architect at a Nordic IT service provider called Every. I have been working with database technology for the last 20 plus years, primarily with SQL Server. I also run the SQL Saturday Oslo together with Johan in my spare time, which is haven't been much lately, but when I have spare time, I love doing bicycling in the woods on the southern coast of Norway, in my hometown of Arendal. Now, please pay attention. We will submit a test because we know...
Actually, we'll be submitting 2 tests today.
Yeah, 2 tests.
Yeah, one privacy, one security.
Yeah. The thing is, your employers, they spend a lot of money to get you to travel here to learn something. That also means they would like to have proof that you have actually learned something. So we will submit tests so that you can provide proof back to your employer that you have actually learned something. No, that's actually just a joke. We will have a quiz, though. And you have the opportunity to win prizes. So I guess if you love to win prizes, then you should pay attention.
Yeah, there will also be cheesy music.
Yeah, we promise that. Yeah. And this is what we're going to talk about today. Security and privacy, why that is important. We have a section about privacy and regulations to consider. Talk about a little bit about the key principles of cloud privacy, a section about security, and the same kind of principles for cloud security.
Yeah. We will not tell you how to comply, because we can't. There's so many different dimensions, but we can give you key points on how to think about and what to think about when you're designing and building or moving to the cloud.
Yes. So this is a bit flippant way to look at the cloud. It's just someone else's computer. And especially managers, or are there any managers in the room, by the way? Managers who don't understand IT so well. They might think, they might believe what the cloud vendors tell you, that they have all these automated services that do pretty much everything for you. So just move to the cloud and, things will be handled.
Well, you can fire your security experts. You don't need them anymore. No.
But of course, yeah, they can help you move your data to the cloud. They have a lot of cool tools that help you govern or at least have control of your data. The thing is that at the end of the day, you are yourself responsible for the data you put there. You are responsible yourself to secure the data. And if there is a breach, guess who's going to get blamed?
You.
Yeah, it's me.
Yeah.
So, security and privacy. They are obviously different things, but still they are related. But they also need to be treated separately. And also, you cannot achieve privacy without security. So that's why we have combined these two together in this session. Let's talk a little bit about privacy then. So we have a bunch of regulations, and the two regulations we're going to focus on today is first and foremost GDPR, the kind of the mothership of privacy regulations, which most regulations after have kind of stolen from or borrowed from. And we are also going to talk a little bit about the California Consumer Privacy Act. And in addition, you might know there are a bunch of other privacy regulations that might apply for you. But we are going to focus on the two first.
Yep. So, GDPR, so the General Data Protection Regulation in the EU, and also, if you were in the keynote today, they left out Norway, where we're from, but also southern Sweden as part of EU. I know the Swedes are strange, but they're still part of the EU. And it's also the European Economic Area, so that's Iceland and Norway, are also part of the GDPR, or encompassed in GDPR. So, the 7 principles: lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. You have purpose limitation. So again, we decide that the data we're storing is lawful, we treat it fairly, and we're transparent about what we're doing with the data. Purpose limitation, we limit the scope of what we're doing with your data. We want to minimize the data being collected and stored, data lifecycle management. Then you have accuracy. So the data that you have on a person needs to be accurate. Because again, if you're in life insurance company, comes in and gets hold of data about your health that says Rune has cancer and probably some other genetic diseases, he can't get the life insurance. So it has to be accurate. So skipped a bit. Storage limitation, again, restricting what you store and how you store it, and where you store it. And of course, integrity and confidentiality. So the data needs to be secure, and if there is a breach, you need to notify immediately. There's quite a strict rule or enforcement of that rule.
Yeah, that's around, is it 72 hours? You have
to notify
your local
authorities.
Yeah.
And which also means accountability. You are held responsible for that. However, there is no principle for individuals' rights or international transfer of personal data. So it's not a principle, but there are detailed descriptions on what GDPR does with that kind of data. So, with GDPR, you need to understand your relation to the data. So it's crucial that you know so you can be in compliance with GDPR, because one way or another, if you're processing data, you will be held accountable for this. So your local supervisory authority of GDPR has the power to take action against you and give you fines, and they are very hefty fines. We'll show you some examples later. And individuals can bring claims, either, again, contacting you to exercise their rights, and they can also bring lawsuits against you. So GDPR, data privacy, assess all the time. The different stakeholders or entities that GDPR are talking about is the data controller. That is the organization that determines the purpose and means of collecting, processing, retaining the personal data. So if you are a company that stores data and you want to do stuff with it, and you decide what you want with it, and then you hire Capgemini to process that data for you, you are the data processor. Sorry, the data controller. And I am the data processor. So that is a company that processes personal data on behalf of another organization. And that organization does not have the final say in how that data will be used. And finally, you have the data subject, which is an identifiable individual. So it's one single person that can be identified one way or another. The data subject, or the GDPR, has both an angle from the company side, but it also has an angle from the person's side. So you have a right of access. I want to access my data. You have the right for rectification. So yes, the data you have about me is wrong. Please correct it, and I will have proof that you have corrected it. You have the right to an erasure. So I don't want you to store that data about me anymore. Please delete it.
Or if you end a business relationship, if you are a customer somewhere and you stop being a customer, they usually don't delete your data right away, but they don't have any reason any longer to store data about you. So you can ask for your data to be erased.
Yeah. And you have the right to restrict processing. So, okay, it's fine that my insurance company stores personal data about me. They need to. But I'm not really happy if they start trying to use that data for understanding my traffic or how I drive in traffic, for instance. So I can set a restriction that says this, you can't process that data to learn more about me than you already know. And you have the right for data portability. So I can call Facebook and say, I want all your data on me. And then Facebook does have, they've implemented that routine now, but they have to actually give me the data, all the data they have about me.
Does Facebook have a phone number? Okay. Do you know it? Because no. I need to call them.
Yeah. According to Facebook, I live in Canberra, and I work with bakery. So yeah. And you have the right to object. I object to you having my data. And then the business has to prove they have a lawful use of your data. So yeah, well, you're a customer with us. We need that data until you're done being a customer. Ccpa is not officially in action yet. That's 1st of January. But it's been talked about a lot. And that is the most encompassing privacy regulation in the US. And according to the keynote today, it's almost by default actually becoming federal law, because there's not that many companies that does not do business in California one way or another. And the intentions behind the Ccpa is that the users can know what personal data is being collected about them. They can know whether their personal data is sold and disclosed, and to who. They can say no to the sale of personal data, and they can access their personal data. You can recognize this from GDPR as well. And they can request the business deleting any personal data or personal information about them. And they have the right to not be discriminated against if they exercise the rights of privacy. The slide deck will be made available afterwards with a long set of notes as well, so you don't have to take too many pictures if you don't like. So again, to the subjects of the regulation, you have, in CCPA, you have a covered business. And a covered business is roughly the same as a data controller in GDPR. However, it has to be a for-profit organization collecting consumers' personal data. It has to do business in California, whether that be having their headquarters in California or having a subsidiary in California. And it has to satisfy at least one of the following thresholds. So it has an annual gross revenue of above $25 million. It processes information about persons, or PII information, of about 50,000 or more consumers, households, or devices. And it earns more than half of its annual revenue from selling consumers' personal information. So it's different focus than the GDPR that way. And the service provider is almost the same as a data processor, but it is a for-profit entity, unlike in GDPR where it can be anything. And then you have the consumer, which is the same as the data subject. But a consumer can also be a household, so it's slightly broader scope. So GDPR regulates all data processors and controllers in the EU, as well as entities abroad that offer services to EU citizens and EEC. And the CCPA covers for-profit entities doing business in California with a revenue of more than $25 million, having more than 50,000 consumers stored, or doing more than 50% of their business selling that data. So the CCPA is way more limited in scope. It's still just mostly the US, whereas GDPR can have global reach. So if you breach or come in and breach with the GDPR, what's the worst or any privacy action really, what's the worst that can happen? Well, there's actually a website called enforcementtracker.com that looks at all the different fines being sent out on according to the GDPR breaches. This one is one example, $182 million. Pounds, yeah. So that's around 200 million euros. That is not final because they haven't done the rounds in the court, but that's the fine that the local authority, the ICO, has issued for them. And of course, AMCA filed for bankruptcy protection because data breaches, massive data breaches, forced them, or they lost all confidence in the market, and people just pulled away their business from them. So it's not just that you might lose compliancy and get fines, but you can also lose your business because people don't trust you anymore. So, some key principles when dealing with privacy in the cloud. According to GDPR, there is a process called DPIA, so Data Privacy Impact Analysis. It's only for GDPR, but it might help you as well designing your cloud privacy, because it takes you through several different steps that you can look at and think about, and that way designing for a better solution. So the first thing you need to do is identify the need for DPA. Do you plan on doing anything with that data, or is it stored and secure and everything is fine? If you're moving data from on-premises to the cloud, that is in fact processing your data. And that in itself will kick off a DPI. If you plan on you've collected a lot of data, maybe we should do a data science study on this. That kicks off a DPIA. So any kind of involvement with that data, except for where it was, and if you talk to some of the lawyers that are GDPR experts, they will say that even storing the data as is needs to be looked at through a DPIA lens. In Norway, sorry, yeah? That includes, if it does include snapshots and backups? Well, yeah, yes, it does, if you're looking at from a broader paranoid perspective. But I would say that it's a legitimate kind of processing of that data, and it's still for retention and so on. So depends on who you ask. I would say no. But there are some GDPR experts around there that say, well, anything is GDPR. And yeah. So next part is describe your processing. You've said, yes, we need to do a DPIA. You need to describe the processing. What are we going to do with that data? Are we moving it? Where are we moving it from? Where are we moving it to? What kind of things are we looking for in the data? Are we just storing it? These kind of things. Then you'll have to do a consultation process. I was working with a Norwegian city that wanted to go into the data lake and move all their both sensitive and unsensitive data into the data lake. And they had to start looking at and interviewing interest organizations. So this is the data. We think that both the citizens and the employees and everybody else in the city will benefit if we move this into a data lake where it is stored one place, better protected. At the same time, we can both do our obligations on storing data for 10 years and so on, and we can start offering better services for the clients or the citizens. You can even pinpoint several individuals if you want and talk to them if there are any vocal citizens in the area. Then you need to assess the necessity and proportionality of the processing that you're doing. So do you really need to go through all that data to find out if I'm eligible for a loan or a mortgage? You probably do, but still, you need to think about it. And you need to identify and assess, again, assess risks. What can happen? What's the worst thing that can happen to this if we are moving that data or processing it? And you need to identify measures to reduce the risk. So what can we do? What kind of programs or monitoring can we do to reduce the risks? And then you need to sign off and record the outcomes. Again, from a GDPR compliance perspective, you need to actually sign this document. If you just want it for non-GDPR compliance, you don't need to do that step. But again, it's taking actions on what you've already documented. Yeah. Principle 2, assess at different phases of design. When you initiate your project, assess. When you plan your project, assess. When you execute your process, assess again. When you close off the project, assess, yes. And of course, when you decommission.
Let me guess.
Pardon? Let me guess.
Yeah,
Yes.
let me guess. Assess?
Yes. So it's the processes around this. You will always need to do checks underway to make sure that you are covering all the bases. Then you can look at privacy-enhancing technologies. So VPNs, encryption, these kind of things. There are both soft and hard privacy technologies. So hard technologies might be routers. Soft technologies are things like PGP, VPNs, and so on. And the fourth principle, it might be the biggest one, know your data. You need to catalog your data. What kind of data do I have? And where do I have it? Then you need to classify your data. What part of this data is PII information? What part can be sensitive in other ways? And what part is not sensitive? And of course, when you build up your catalog and you've tagged all the data, the metadata that is in there, you will need to continuously maintain it. Otherwise, it's pretty useless. And of course, you need to track your data. You need to have a lineage of your data. And this is from several key points. One is that you need to know in all the different flows of your data where that data is stored. If I come in and say you need to delete my data, you will need to know exactly where you go to delete everything. At the same time, you will need to know who has had access to that data. Again, tracking back and forth, and then checking the logs to see who has at any potential time been able to access that data for you. Principle 5, secure your data. Restrict access to the raw data. When you're changing from an on-premise solution where you have everything stored in your data sources, you might have a data stage somewhere if you're dealing with data warehousing. In the cloud perspective, you will always, or mostly, dump data one-to-one into a data lake or some kind of a storage as raw data. And that has to be stored. Might be compliant to regulations forcing you to store that data unchanged. So you need to have that secured down. Who can have access to that data? Data scientists typically they love raw data because they dig for gold within the data noise or whatever you want to call it. But do they really need that access? Maybe you should give that on an ad hoc basis instead. Only expose aggregated or synthesized data if possible. So for dev and test, never use production data. Synthesize. If it seems that a data scientist or an analytician can have just as much value if you synthesize, so you hash the social security number, you hash parts of the address, so you can still get information about a person, but you don't really know where they live, just roughly the area. If that is enough, that is the data set that you will need to give out. Don't give them the raw data, because then again, you increase the exposure surface for any privacy breaches.
There are several tools out there that can help you. Well, another term is, instead of synthesize, is to mask your data. Mm-hmm. Any DBAs in the room? Any DBAs heard about the DBA tools? DB tools? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there are some functionality in that library to help masking your data. So you can use that if you're going to move your production data to a test and dev environment. So yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah, and of course you have dynamic data masking as well in SQL Server, even though that is not secure. There are ways around it. But if you use dynamic data masking and then you load that data to somewhere, you are in control, so you don't have to worry about that part. And of course, encrypt wherever possible. So one thing is that yes, Azure Data Lake storage is encrypted at rest, but maybe you should consider encrypting the files themselves as well. Yeah?
How do you sort of handle outliers and make a decision? For example, I might be a 95-year-old woman that lives in a very small town. Might only have those attributes about me, but of course, if you have those, it's easy to work out who that person is.
Yeah, so again, question is how can we work out if there are data enough to recognize a person? So yeah.
So like an outlier in the data set,
Yeah.
extreme outlier.
Yeah, again, if you're looking at health data, that is actually a pretty good problem, or big problem, because there might only be one celiac in the village. Me. So again, that's where you look at aggregates and synthesizing data. And you might have, depending again on the nature of the data you're sitting on, know your data, the principle before, to make sure that when you're dealing with that kind of information, you only have, say, minimum of 10 objects within the data set that you're delivering out. So it's a lot harder to find out. Yeah. There are some algorithms that can help you with this, but I can't tell you which ones because I don't know. So, and yes, do not use production data in dev and test. And again, track your data. Know where that has been, where it has been. Yeah.
You were talking about the dynamic data masking. Are you saying that when you, like, let's say you're doing, someone needs data.
Yep.
And everyone prefers production data except for everyone that manages production data. Are you saying that if you use dynamic data masking as the entity that's pulling from production data to like put it down into a dev test environment, that that masking would go with it? So by the time it landed, it actually like you basically destroyed data that you don't want in dev test, like through that. Are you saying that? Is that what you're...
Yeah, if you're using dynamic data masking as on a view or a table, and you use, for instance, SSIS to pull that data out, you will synthesize the data that way.
That's, when you say synthesize, the definition of that means...
Yeah, you remove the personal information. Yep.
Thank you so much. That's fantastic.
As long as the SSIS service account doesn't have permissions to the...
Yeah, exactly. You don't want the person or that you deliver data to have access to the dynamic data masking, because then they can get around it. But if you are the one in control of the table with the dynamic data masking on it, and you are the one pushing the data, then you have control.
One comment on that. I remember the keynote last year in a demo where they essentially took the prod database, applied dynamic data masking, BCP'd it all out, truncated the tables, BCP'd it back, and it's like, oh yeah, cool, here's credit card data, but it's all obfuscated.
Yeah, that's what I just wanted to confirm that that's what was going on.
Yeah. Because I know that Microsoft, at least in the beginning, were saying, oh, but this is a security feature. But it's not. You can't trust it unless you are the one controlling it. So, principle number 6 is monitor everything. Use the monitoring tools you have, and if you're moving to the cloud, both AWS and Azure has a lot of rich monitoring tools for you, even down to the file access level in your data lake. So use the tools you have. And then you need to create triggers and alerts. So what do you want to trigger on? Is that somebody that has not lawful access to the data tries to get access, or something else? You need to decide what kind of triggers and alerts you build on them. And of course, there is no use building a complete set of regulations and alerts if you don't actually act on them. So, yes. And preferably, if you can, have somebody being a privacy officer, so data protection, data privacy kind of role, is a very smart idea, even though that person sometimes feels very lonely in the company. I had one guy coming in. I brought in my chief information security architect into a meeting, and they were talking and yet nodding, and everybody was happy, except for the guys around him, his bosses. And then in the end, when he came out, he came to my colleague, thank you, twice. He almost tears in his eyes. So it's a lonely role, but it's a very necessary role. Principle 7, remember to design with these rights, the principle we had, in mind. And then you also have to remember the right to be informed, the right to erasure. Put the hooks in the data as you do, when you design your data flow. If you do that by design, when you get hit by a privacy regulation, it's a lot easier to handle afterwards. the right to rectification. Again, processes to know where that data is, data lineage, and how to update all the way. And of course, the right to restrict processing. You should have some kind of a flag telling you that this person has been exempted for data processing.
Game time!
Whee! Somebody's falling asleep already, so that's no wonder this is a heavy subject.
So that means you need to get your phone, at least if you want to participate.
Whee! Yeah, so Kahoot is actually developed by a Norwegian company. It's a quiz kind of app. You could either download it as an app or you can enter on the web page. Probably is faster right now. This is the ID that you will see that you will need to enter.
Yeah,
Put in your, you need to turn on music.
Yeah, we need this.
Yes. Put in a nickname, and when we're starting, there will be 5 questions today. You have 10 seconds to answer each one of them. It's a multiple choice thing, so it's easy. But you will get scores on right answer and how quickly you answer correctly.
This music really gets you in the mood, right?
And there will be prizes after for the 3 best. Everybody still trying to connect?
You look really excited.
All right. Still not connected? It's completely anonymous. Now, if you use the web page and just click in the number, the only thing that would be tracked about you is the IP address, which everyone else here has, and the nickname that you've got. So it's, but good. Don't trust. Okay. Yes. Which of these? Oh, this is the wrong one. It's the wrong one.
Fantastic.
Oh, come on.
Fantastic. Sorry about that. That's totally my fault.
Just take it out. Sorry, you need to go out again. Yeah.
But now you're ready. Now you know how to do it, right?
Yeah. It's just
Now
really being prepared.
Okay. We need music. I apologize.
Oh, but I have to pay for changing the music, so yeah, this is a free version. Yeah, we should be enough now. It's 21. Yep. Oh, 24.
Okay,
Good.
let's try. Again.
Let's try again. So, which major privacy regulation came first? Hey, not bad.
So Brett in the lead here. Okay.
so far. What is a data processor in GDPR? Somebody fell asleep, I see. And Brett's still eating.
He has better internet connection.
Oh yes, probably why.
Better interconnection.
So, how many core principles are there in GDPR?
Wow, impressive.
Good.
You paid attention. Most of you.
Oh, and then a mouse. So what does DPIA stand for? I made this a bit difficult on purpose, so sorry. Still an mouse. Next, last question. So what word did Johan use the most? All right, and the winner is Gaz, with Red on second and Mike on third.
So
Yay.
Gas. Who's Gas?
Who's Gaz?
And
Yeah.
Red. And Mike.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Good.
So after the session, you will get prizes.
Yeah, so just come up here after the session.
It did not protect their privacy.
Well, they consented to this.
So,
Good. And we'll put it there. Next up, the security part. And I just put this XKCD in. It might be recognizable. Doesn't really matter how fancy you do it. There might be some very simple way around that. Even though $5 wrenches might be a bit hard to come by. So, again, my favorite word, assessment, or assess. Cloud security assessment. And this is because you need to make sure that you're compliant with all the regulations around you. You need to identify the risks you are facing in key areas. So, again, compliancy, regulatory risks, data protection risks. Okay, are you hit by Ccpa, Gdpr, some of the other ones? Security risks. What kind of security surfaces, what angles of attack can there be? These kind of things. Vendor risks. So if you are going to the cloud, which of these vendors out there is best offering for you, or filling the needs you have? There might be third-party tools that you're buying. Do they comply with all the regulations and standards that you need? Are they ISO 27001 certified, for instance? And there are surveys and reports out there that detail, among Gartner, I think, which of the cloud vendors are most secure. There is actually 2 in the lead and 1 a bit behind. Then you need to assess the different areas of interest. So identity. Make sure you don't have any identity silos. Keep in mind privileged access management, so only give those who need it access. Service and system identities. If you can, use service accounts. Multi-factor authentication. Please, for the love of God, do not turn that off. So control identity, PAM solutions, separation of duties, and so on. Monitor. Again, avoid monitoring silos. Have a broad scope connected to your monitoring solutions, so it covers most of it. And try to look at whether you're going for a semi-trust or full trust of the cloud solution you're looking at. Look at things like data movement and these kind of things. And of course, there is always the human factor. Try to identify angles of attack. Again, the easiest way to get at least money out is sending an email or calling the secretary of somebody that you know is on vacation and say, well, this is the SFO or CFO. I need to pay this bill immediately. Please do it for me. And I'm surprised at the number of times that trick actually works. You need to think about information leakage. One thing is USB pens. Another thing is when you're sitting on an airplane, how many people have these when you're working with sensitive data where you're on the train or in the airplane? Very few do. I read some interesting secret documents on the planes, on the flights from time to time. And of course, encryption and key management. All the cloud providers give you a set of tools to do encryption. And they all also give you the ability to bring your own keys. The problem with bringing your own keys is that also means that you need to make sure you have those keys stored somewhere where not only you as the manager in charge, but somebody else on your team also have access, because there are companies that has fallen over because with that single person with the key access died. Yeah. I actually worked in a company where the chief developers on our ERP system did paragliding and these wingsuits, and he tended to go on these trips just before release day. And of course, you have uncontrolled adoption or shadow IT. I was at a customer just recently where their ERP system was a shadow IT system. From a security standpoint, that is no fun. Then you need to look at threat modeling. And the threat modeling is a process for identifying and enumerating potential threats and prioritize mitigations. Again, where am I most vulnerable to attack? What are the most relevant threats that I might be facing? And what do I need to do to safeguard against these threats? You can use a data flow diagram like this to start looking at where those angles might be, what can happen in different flows, different areas of your organization. There are some common methodologies that you can use. Stride, for instance, is developed by Microsoft. Came into being around end of 90s. Then you have PASTA, which is very good with Bolognesos, but it's also an acronym for process. So let's see what it was. Process for attack simulation and threat analysis. Then you have Trike, and you have VAST. Stride and PASTA are the most commonly used, and if you're a Microsoft shop, it might be the best methodology to look for in the beginning. And the approach by Microsoft is define your security requirements and then create an application diagram like the one I showed you. And that's the first step. So diagram is the first step. Identify the threats that you might be facing and look at those in respect to your diagram. Mitigate those threats. So what can you do to reduce the risk of those threats? And then again, try assessment, validates that the threats have been mitigated. And there is a tool by Microsoft called the threat modeling tool. You can download it from their site. That will help you. That will guide you through that process. Once you do have put up your model, do strategic planning. Involve all the key stakeholders. If you don't know who the key stakeholders are, identify them. Then you identify the vulnerabilities that you might be facing. And of course, this one is for the managers out there. Invest in regular training, because this is an ever-evolving track. Prioritize data privacy. Again, it's easy for you to explain to your managers why they should. Just point at the British Airways £182 million fine. That's a lot of money. And use a layered approach to security. Do not just look at infrastructure. Do not just look at identity access management. Look at the different layers, different angles, on all the way from the bottom of your stack to the top. And do not skimp on security. And again, it comes back to the fines that you might be facing or the loss of trust. So this is architecture I made together with my colleagues in Capgemini. Best practice security in cloud last year. And it's now slightly outdated. It's still part of what you should do. Let's see if I can... No, sorry. I'll go back. This one?
Debug.
Yeah, I got the book. So, for Zoom.
Bare hold in this.
Yeah, let's see it. There we go. So, it's looking at... I think I give up that. There's something called a Waf Web Application Firewall. That restricts and monitors all traffic going in from your web service down to your database, looking at typical angles of attack. So insertion, pardon? SQL injection, yes, thank you. My brain stopped working for a minute. All these kind of different ways of attacking using common patterns, the Web Application Firewall monitors and tries to filter out and stop. Using subnets on each of the different parts of your stack, and then having network security groups on those, limiting who can get access to what part of your what part of your net. So this is a very common methodology, and using jump box, if you are using multi-site connection to your cloud, having a jump box where all your clients and users are going through makes it easier to reduce the attack angle. And of course, if you're internet facing, you also need to have some sort of a firewall. That's where it plays load balancing and so on. But again, this one is outdated. Same with Amazon, AWS, same kind of approach, using WAFs, using security groups, using subnets, and separating all the different parts of your layers into subnets with rules on who can access what. Is a very sensible approach, but it is not enough anymore. So this is 18 months, it's outdated. You will need to look into DevSecOps. I hate that word because everything should be DevOps, and then there's DataOps, DevSecOps, oh, whatever. But the thing is, again, you need to look at how your developers are working. Where are they storing their repositories? Is GitHub secure enough? Should you look at, okay, now you start getting private accounts, private access. Again, secure repositories, look at code. And in the cloud, everything is code. Infrastructure as code, yes. Fantastic. It means that you can validate and test your code even down to the infrastructure layer. Get them to go through the loops in a DevOps model, again, checking in your branch, getting that run through automated testing, out through a new set of testing, getting somebody else to do code reviews on it, and in the end release and start over again. So DevSecOps, even though I hate the word, is a very good methodology to look into. But again, doing DevOps is hard. It's not just implementing a set of rules. you will need to get the people trained and working on it. 4 sites. How are we on time? 40:25?
Good on time.
Good on time, good. You need to review your overall approach for cloud security to assess the flexibility of your solution and to support future developments. As I understand, that architecture I developed is outdated, or at least not good enough anymore. So you need to change and be adaptable. And do tailored analysis on specific areas. And this is, again, designing new fancy words. FAS. What the hell is FAS? It's function as a service. You now also have CAS, so container as a service, which is, CAS is between infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. And then you have FAS between platform and software as a service, basically. But yeah. And again, look at the different areas. So should you go for functions instead of containers? Even though microservices is really hot right now, maybe it's easier to go serverless and use functions. That is further down the track, and it's further away from being the hot thing, but it's moving there. So you need to think about those kind of things as well. And you need to have somebody, if you have a data privacy officer, as I recommended earlier, somebody needs to keep track of incoming privacy regulations. As mentioned in the keynote today, companies didn't think it mattered. It would be business as usual, and then it hit them hard. And you need to think about potential implications of wider business strategy changes on your cloud security strategy. Yes, business to business, data as science as a service. Sounds brilliant. But again, what happens? Where should we share that data? Can we secure it? Can we guarantee everything is okay? And use vendors and subject matter experts. Build relationships. Invite people over for, just for getting a subject matter expert out for lunch might be, if you manage to get them bribed that easily, perfect. Build relationships, maintain them, so that you can get insights on where these things are going. As it's aptly said, skate where the puck is going. Yeah. If you can see where things are moving, what direction the business development or the software development, security implications are moving, you can be in the forefront. You can be doing, changing things as before you're actually being hit by somebody discovering a breach that hadn't been there before. Coming back to the shared responsibility model, you've all seen this before, I guess. But the thing about moving to the cloud, either you're using it, either if you're using on-premise, using infrastructure as a service, if you're using software as a service, these parts, so governance and risk, compatibility, and then, of course, data security, all these things are your responsibility. No matter where that data is, it's you that will be on the line, and your company that will pay the fine if you get breaches. So there are several different aspects when you are looking into cloud again. Looking at infrastructure security, you need to look at subnets, network security groups, networking concepts, firewalls, routers. I actually went to a company that where the networking guys had put a huge router between them and the cloud because they thought that that would make them less subject to vendor lock-in. In the end, it's cost the company a fortune, and we're still struggling with networking problems that they had in that box. So then you have data security, and you need to look at what kind of tooling does the vendor give you. So you have things like Azure information, what is it called again? Information protection. AWS has something called Maisie. Classification of your data, encryption of the data, what kind of methodology do you want to use. And of course things like data leakage prevention and encryption key management, all these kinds of things. Do you want to have bring your own keys or not? And then there's the application security, code reviews, testing, where are the repositories stored, and so on. And of course, overall identity and access management. Which technology are you using? Azure Active Directory. Do we have two-factor authentication? And you turn on two-factor authentication by SMS or by an app. And please do not use SMS. Yeah, I saw somebody cringing. Yes. That is one of my pet peeves. And of course, governance, risk management, and compliance. Underlying anything you do, you need to have those mapped up and what kind of tools you can use to help you doing these things. And we are actually on to our Kahoot. We did this.
It's a quiz time again?
Yeah.
Cool. Unless there are some questions you would like to clear up before we start gaming? No? Yes. No worries. The slides will be uploaded to the PASS Summit site and probably available sometime next week, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, question? If government entities like US government entities fall under GDPR, if they do business with or collect data on EU subjects, they might, yes. If a EU citizen had lived in US, for instance, 2 years ago or 5 years ago, then moved back to EU, and they wanted to make sure that the data about them in the US was stored. Yes, they would have to comply.
But if they will, that's another matter, but yeah.
But again, it also comes back to the lawfulness. If you can define, I mean, it might be a lawful storage of your data because the governmental agency in question has the rights and the needs to store that data for some reason, then that will be okay. So it all falls back to, do I have a business requirement for keeping that data? And yeah, if the data that is breached for some reason, yes, then that will be, you can hit them. Whether that will be followed through or not, I don't know, because it's, again, government entities, you're starting to move into diplomacy.
Someone would have to prosecute you.
Yeah, someone would have to prosecute you, and yeah, it's a shady area, but in principle, yes. So, gaming time.
Yeah, we need that. I think we're good.
Yeah.
So, let's start. Are you ready? First question. Which of these is a threat modeling methodology?
surprisingly enough.
Bento is in the lead. Second question.
Privacy or security? I like people listen.
Yeah, well, most of you, happy you agree. KB in lead. What will always be responsibility of data owner in the cloud?
Still Bento in the lead.
Yeah, there's a tie actually.
Yeah.
What are the steps in Microsoft's threat modeling?
Sorry, I also made this one hard.
That showed.
Yep.
So KB in the lead again. And the last question, what's a key to security design success? Yay, awesome. So let's see, who is the winner? KB with SQL Doc on second and Bento on third. So KB, cool, SQL Doc, and Bento, awesome.
Awesome. You can come up here. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them now or come up to stage. I have contact details here, and we will also have them on the slide.
Yeah.
Remember to have session evaluation. Session evaluations put in afterwards. We will really appreciate feedback.
Yeah, that's
And yeah,
one.
you had a question? Yes, everything evolved. If you can bring your own keys to every part of the services in Azure, yes, you can, because
Like not necessarily encrypt the data per se within the database, but encrypt the entire MDF file.
yeah, all the services are data on rest, and as long as you use Azure Key Vault and you bring your own keys, you should be able to encrypt or use the encryption at rest methods with your keys.